Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week is going to be the turn of the musician, bass player and writer. It is Will Carruthers, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other quite groovy stuff. Anyway, one-time member of Spacemen 3 and Spiritualized, was also in various other bands, I think about 30, including the Brian Jonestown Massacre, Free Love Babies, which I think is the title of his own solo work, and lots of others. But anyway, we're going to find out more about that and also his book. So sit back, relax and enjoy. So after several minutes of casual chat, we got down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Will, it's over to you.
Oh, my musical awakening. My musical awakening was probably the 3 records that my dad left behind before he fucked off, which was Buddy Holly, Louis Armstrong and Ray Charles. So I vividly remember them being played. And I remember the babysitter that used to come round, she used to bring an Elvis record, and then she used to sneak us off for a bottle of Coke and a bag of crisps in the back of her little minivan at the Flying Saucer in Lutterworth. So it's all kind of, I don't know, inextricably linked in me to this kind of vaguely naughty behaviour. Do you know, Elvis? I'd hear Elvis and then we'd be sitting in the minivan, being sworn to secrecy about. And then, I don't know, after that, I like the Jungle Book. I had a copy of the Jungle Book and I loved that album when I was a kid. I think it's the first one that I got to choose. So I won that Jungle Book, and it's great stuff on there. All the Louis Prima stuff and that is fucking amazing. But after that, I don't know if later on when I got to choose, I'm a little bit younger than you, so I think the first actual album I ever bought was probably a Blondie album. I think it was Parallel Lines. Lines or E to the B.
Yes, well, Parallel Lines did have an amazing, just had sort of, I don't know how many tracks, but there was one which is still my favourite, 11:59, which was just on side 2, and it was just awesome record. So, yes, those two by Blondie. I think my second single I bought was Denis Denis by Blondie. So, and it had something like Contact in Red Square and Ripper to Shreds as a B-side. So,
yeah, that's good stuff. They were some band.
Yes. So with So did you have any brothers or sisters that had any musical influence on you apart from your babysitter?
I would say my sister, I've got a younger sister, and she had some influence on me, kind of in reverse. She got into all after I'd been kind of completely consumed by music later on, she kind of sideways glimpsed me. But there was a fella up the road called Martin Brennan, and his brother, Sean Brennan, a vast record collection and was crazy for like all the old punk stuff and Cabaret Voltaire and just like all the weird obscure stuff. So we'd go and dig through his records and steal them away, you know, Stiff Little Fingers and I don't know. Yeah, Cabaret Voltaire was a particular favourite for me, I guess around 84, 85.
Yes.
But no, yeah, so that he was a big influence quietly.
Yes,
and then John Peel, I guess, yes. So about 83, 84, you were 16. Did you leave school at that age, or did you go on to greater things or college? Educationally,
yes.
Not really. I left, did my A-levels, started doing my A-levels, got thoroughly disenchanted and fucked off to Birmingham and got a job in a factory at 17. So I was working in a sheet metal factory at 17.
Right, because the only other person I hear talking about sheet metal is obviously Tommy Iommi from Black Sabbath. So
Sabbath, yeah.
Did you? Because I had an older brother who was into prog rock, but he did have 2 heavy metal albums, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Were Black Sabbath influence on your musical horizon?
Were they not really? We were listening to a lot of that. But I did work with a guy who used to sell hash to Ozzy Osbourne. And he told me that story. He's like, I used to sell hash to Ozzy. He said he was crazy as a fucking loon when he was 16. You know, he told me a story about him coming around the house once to buy some hash. He said he'd gone out saying, I was going to get some cider. And then about an hour later, they heard a commotion outside on the landing. So they opened the door and Ozzy was kicking down the next door neighbour's door because he thought they weren't answering. So, you know, in that way, it was kind of an influence just because it's like, oh, I worked with somebody that sold hash to Ozzy Osbourne. But metal wasn't a big thing for me, really. I was never a metaler somehow. Yes. Stooges, I got into the Stooges at 17 and then it was all a bit absurd. I found all that 80s metal kind of absurd, all that lycra and kind of hairspray. We were a bit dirtier, you know, we were a bit dirtier.
Yes, well, I never got to the 80s heavy metal, but the 70s, you know, obviously Motorhead, but there was also a massive, because I've sort of, from the countryside of East Anglia, the status quo were very important in our lives. You had to like the quo or you would get beaten up. But Deep Purple were the other band, but I didn't get into hair metal, but I just wondered if Black Sabbath, because they were your kind of local band.
Not really. I mean, I came to them late. I love Sabbath stuff now. You know, I love it, and I even, you know, indulge in a little hair metal occasionally if I'm pushed to it. You know, if it's impossible to escape. But, no, it was never really a huge influence. Because I mean, the time was like 16, 17. Then we kind of got into the old 60s psychedelia. So we got into that really early, you know, age-wise. So by the time we were into that, it was just like, you know, it was an antidote to everything else that was being foisted upon us in some ways. And it seemed more mysterious.
Well, absolutely. Yes, there was nothing quite as exciting as hearing the, I don't know, Captain Beefheart or the Velvet Underground and such bands.
Especially when the actual information about them was limited. So you were kind of able to build a mythology around them in your own mind. You know, just purely in your imagination, imagine that the way that they lived. You know, yes. I kind of like that the information wasn't there. It was limited.
It was very limited.
Yeah, so the infrared elevators were like, it could have been creatures from outer space as far as I was concerned. And they probably were. You know, Captain Beefheart certainly is. Yes. I'm pretty sure he came from another planet.
Well, I did an interview with John Drumbo French, who sort of was doing the Magic Band. He was kind of touring, I don't know, probably 5-6 years ago. So I did a couple of interviews because he was coming to Norwich, and he did say it was quite harrowing experience working with the Captain, because he kind of got locked in the house to do Troutmaster's Replica, didn't they? He wouldn't be able to leave. And they didn't have, weren't properly fed, and he was quite young at the time, so he was kind of traumatized by the whole experience of this kind of.
Still traumatized. No pleasant memories of it at all.
No.
I mean, to be fair, that's being in bands in general, isn't it? Really, it's fairly traumatic. I've been in like 35 of them, and they all have their little traumas somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, what's a trauma but a dream? But it's merely a dream, dream.
Well, I think with Drumbo French, I think he just wished he had sort of been in a band like Crosby, Stills and Nash, you know, and just kind of got a nice little paycheck, and, you know, rather than just this tortured artist, got no money, got sort of emotionally abused, I guess, and just kind of left, really.
I can understand that. Because I mean, I'd much rather have been in Funkadelic, you know, to be fair.
Yes, it would have been much easier.
Choice again, or a heavy metal band. I'd quite like to have been in a heavy metal band just because it was probably more fun.
But I think those recording experiences where it's almost residential, whereas, you know, like Troutmaster's Replica was recorded in a lonely location with no one else in a house, you know, everyone slowly turning mad. I think it was probably a bit hard, really. But when you listen to the album, there is a certain, you think, my God, these people were on another planet, weren't they?
I have to say I'm a big Captain Beefheart fan, and I've never made it all the way through Troutmaster's Replica, and I don't understand it. Why anybody would ever want to. I like dip in now and again, and I really enjoy the lyrics. I really enjoy his lyrics, but I've never made it through that album. You know, I love the cover. but fuck making that one. You know what I mean? I must have been miserable.
So when did you get a musical instrument? When did when did you think, right, I'm not just going to be a fan, I'm going to sort of pick up a bass?
It was pretty shallow, really, to be honest. My first instrument is me and my friends were kind of BMXers. I was a BMX kid when I was about, I don't know, 15, 16. And then at a certain point, me and my friends group decided that, you know, it wasn't that impressive to members of the opposite sex to have a fucking BMX. Do you know what I mean? We were just like sad kids jumping off ramps in the street. So then we started playing guitars. I'm not sure if it was actually that shallow, but I've got a horrible feeling that was a fairly big motivating factor. That it was just a bit cooler to play an instrument. So yeah, I got a guitar. I bought a guitar off a heavy metal woman who looked like Susie Quattro, and it was an Eros Mark II Gibson copy. So I got that, and then started playing, and there was loads of guitarists in the first sort of band I was in, and I was probably the worst of them. So I was relegated to bass guitar fairly quickly, which, you know, was fine by me.
Yes, well, I think Lemmy Kilmister, I think the reason he sort of picked up a guitar was that he saw other people and the members of the opposite sex were naturally drawn to it. So he thought, right, that's it. I'm going to be in the Rockin' Vickers and off I go, because that's just going to work. And it did. So I guess it was, you know, at 16.
It seems really shallow to say it, because it didn't actually work out that way anyway. You know, I just ended up sitting in my bedroom for fucking hours trying to learn how to play Batman, you know. But so, you know, arguably it just led to more masturbation.
Yes, well, that sort of age, it's you know, it keeps you amused.
It's inevitable. It's cheap.
Yes, we hadn't
cheap
even got
night in, isn't it?
Well, it was a cheap night, and also, you know, we didn't have anything to distract us. There was very few little things to sort of go, oh, that's a bit more interesting. You know, we hadn't even probably got a phone in the house at that stage in our life. So yes, it was. We didn't have dial-up computers, nothing.
Yeah, no, it's just you could go to the park, hang about at the park, but even that, you know, it's just. Yeah, the music, it was good. It was a good way to sit in a bedroom and kind of entertain yourself, really.
With that dream, the dream.
No, I don't think I had any dreams. Or honestly, I never thought about being in a band or like I didn't have any ambitions, but it was just something to do. And then I took the guitar with me to the factory, and I was living in this Irish pub in Birmingham in Small Heath at the end of the Leyland factory. So I was all of a sudden at 17. And the only thing I took with me was the guitar, because I just loved playing the guitar. And I used to listen to Jimi Hendrix a lot. I had Electric Ladyland. And I failed miserably to sound like, and I still am failing miserably to be as good as Jimi Hendrix, along with everybody else in the world. So
that's kind of, yeah, but you are pitching yourself quite ambitiously here. I'm not, you know, you don't want to ever put anyone down, but Jimi Hendrix is kind of quite special, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to try and be as good as. I never thought I'd be as good as Jimi Hendrix.
I always get it mixed up. Is it Noel Redding who's the bassist, or Mitch Mitchell?
Noel Redding was the bass player. Mitch Mitchell was the drummer.
No,
and I believe that Jimi Hendrix played a little bit of the bass, especially on the later albums. I think maybe it sounds like him on Electric Ladyland. Some of the bass playing.
Yes, well, I think he was getting fed up with the band at that stage, wasn't he? So I think he was going on with the band of gypsies or rainbow gypsies, whatever he called them at Woodstock. Yes, so you would sort of walk. So Hendrix, yes, obviously our main man at the. Listening to Purple Haze when you were 16, it always seems very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it was Axis Boulder's Love. That was one of the first albums I bought after my initial kind of infatuation with music. And I don't know, I was always drawn to the more lyrical side of his playing. I like his ballads. Do you know?
Yes.
I love the ballads, and I like his gentler tones. I don't think he gets much appreciation for that. People love the full-on bangers, but he was a jazzy motherfucker, soulful jazzy motherfucker.
Well, there's a beautiful song called, I think, Drifting, isn't there? Drifting, which was one of his
Drifting's lovely, and then the quieter stuff on Electric Ladyland, The Love, and Little Wing. I mean, is this metal? Some people would consider it metal, wouldn't they? He was a metal precursor, I imagine.
Yeah, it wasn't. He wasn't like. He wasn't like Jeff Beck or Eric Clapton. I don't think he had that. I think he was too soulful, actually. I think he had a soul jazz kind of rhythm and blues vibe to him that was beyond metal.
Because he came from that background, right? I mean, he played with the soul reviews and stuff, so that came through. Even in the psychedelia, there was always that kind of soul influence, which I like, and I love all those old soul tunes. You know.
Yeah, and he played with Little Richard as well, very briefly.
Exactly. He knew his chops, you know. So
he had that heritage, and I mean, it's a thing with the Hendrix. Just on the Hendrix, there is a sort of. I think there's something kind of like you can move to his music, whereas a lot of those other guys playing. Are kind of they're not really coming from the bass, that bass chakra, are they? They're not coming from the hip, you know. They're not like, wow, this is kind of got anyway. So that's my theory.
Too much head, and not enough hips. All right, can be terrible.
Yeah, so I think he definitely had hips. He definitely had hips.
You've got to have the hips. Right?
You've got to. So as the 60s progressed, and did you stay 60 as the 80s progressed? Were you staying in the we were in the 80s still? Were you still in the sort of sheet metal factory kind of throughout that period, or had Thatcher destroyed the industry?
I think it was the real fag end of what that industry was in Birmingham when I was working over there. I was working in the jewellery quarter. And there was lots of little shops, like little sheet metal shops and little watchmakers and jewelers, and you could look through the window and see people working. And I think that's pretty much gone now. I haven't been over there for a long time, but I think it's pretty much gone. I don't think there's that manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing. So I guess that was on the way out. But I was going back to Rugby. I was living in this Irish pub, so I was hearing a lot of Irish music from the jukebox till like 4 a.m. The Queen's Head at the end of Garrison Lane was quite a pub, you know, it really was. So that was like full of people working road gangs, and you know, a lot of people working on road gangs, the Irish people there. So that was quite an eye opener at 17. They were lovely people to me, of course. So, but I learned to drink Guinness, and then I went back to Rugby, which is where, of course, I grew up. And then I was hanging out with the musicians and getting into all sorts of nefarious ways of life there.
Yes. So were you sort of a John Peel listener at this stage? Were you listening to...
Yeah, absolutely. Even at the factory, like being back in the pub, I remember listening to John Peel, hearing like Never Understand, hearing the Mary Chain and stuff. I remember hearing that stuff. I had tickets to see them twice in Birmingham, and I think they cancelled both because they were a threat to civilization or something.
Yes, there was that stage, wasn't there? But you probably got Zig Zig Sputnik instead. So
I did see Zig Zig Sputnik. I did see Zig Zig Sputnik in Coventry Poly, and I guess that was about 85. And that was the most violent gig I've ever been to in my life. He was goading the crowd. Martin Degville was goading the crowd, basically going, "You'll never amount to anything. You're a bunch of fucking losers. You know, you'll never do anything." I'm like, "Mate, you're in fucking Coventry." Do you know, I was told once walking around Coventry, "Stop smiling. You'll get your fucking head kicked in," right? And I'm just like, this is going to go up. And I mean, the crowd was so fucking angry. Right? I remember turning around and this woman just kneed me in the nuts, right? And I was like, "What did you do that for?" And she's like, "I don't know. And then he got glassed. I think somebody from Rugby actually got on stage and hit him with a bottle. Those were the days. Those were the fucking days.
No crash barriers.
It was exciting. No, because I think he had the Ultra Vixens. Zig Zig Sputnik, I think, had a female security detail.
That's right.
He's very glamorous with the Ultra Vixens, but you know, it's Coventry, mate. It's fucking. Yeah, I love Cov. I was a bit rude about Coventry in my book, so I have to be nice about it.
Yes, well, that's fine. Did you get into any of the kind of indie pop scene, like the Nightingales, or We've Got a Fuzzbox and We're Going to Use It, or any of those, or the Prefects, or any bands? Was that kind of on your orbit, or the two-tone scene?
Two-tone stuff I loved because it was just unavoidable where we were from. And I remember going over to Brighton, which is in the shadow is a car factory town in the shadow of Coventry, and watching the people there fight while Ghost Town was being played. That's quite fighting. It's all violence, isn't it, in the Midlands, or it was back then.
It was.
It fucking was back then. So, yeah, the specials were I love the specials, you know. How could you not love Two Tone? How could you not love it?
Yes.
So, yeah, Two Tone and reggae, of course. I listened to a lot of reggae. I've been in Birmingham. I lived in Perry Bar in Birmingham. This would have been just after the Handsworth riots. You know, so I was living right on the edge of Handsworth, near to the Lozells Road, just round the corner from the Saddam Hussein temple, in a haunted house. I didn't believe in ghosts. And my Irish landlady said, that house is haunted you're moving into. And I was just like, get away with your fucking superstitious nonsense. I don't believe in anything. At 17, I was so clever, I didn't believe in anything. And surely when I left that place, I believed in ghosts. And I also believed in 3-day blues parties, because you could hear like 3 days blues parties, which were like reggae parties that have in Birmingham. You just hear bass line. I'd hear bass line for 3 days. Just a doom.
Yes.
All that Armageddon time bass line. So
I know.
And then the indie stuff. I mean, was I a huge indie fan? I'd kind of gone through that by pillaging my mate's brother's records, and we'd got into a lot of the indie stuff through him and through John Peel. I used to enjoy that stuff. What were my favourites? I know I kind of like the Redskins, do you know?
Oh God, yes.
Billy Bragg, stuff like
Neither
that.
Washington nor Moscow. We love that album.
Yeah, I like the Redskins because they had the kind of northern soul thing going on as well.
It was the Clash meets Motown, wasn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah. Exactly.
It was just genius, fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say, because then also, because the 80s for me, there was kind of, and you'll probably realise, yes, you are one of those twiddly kids. I love the Smiths, okay? From 83 to 87, the Smiths were there, and they were like my band, I suppose. I thought they were just...
I don't know why the Smiths just never got to me. I listen to the songs and I go, it's a great song, but they just never grabbed me in the way that they grabbed some people. And I've got no idea why. I listen to those songs now and I'm like, yeah, that's a great song. There's some great songs, but they never got to me in the way that other people I know were consumed by the Smiths. Do you know? I'm just going to go and get my wine. 1 sec.
Get your wine. Don't do anything about the wine. That's good.
Sorry, it's very unprofessional.
No, it keeps it real though.
I brought it with me.
Yes.
Okay.
So look, but the 80s, you mentioned reggae, because I can remember, going to the gigs at the UEA, and there was always those there was Sly and Robbie and the Taxi Gang, there was Misty and Roots, there was Burning Spear, there was Aswad, Gregory Isaacs. it was just
Steel
the
Pulse.
glory. Pardon?
Steel Pulse, because I was in Handsworth. It
was a gorgeous, it was a glorious time for roots reggae. So it
really
was quite good. Did you, as you were fiddling around on your bass, was there any particular bassist that you were trying to copy or channel?
No, I was, Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix. To be honest, by the time I'd been relegated to bass guitar, and our band was kind of me, Natty Brooker, who was the original drummer in Spacemen 3, and Steve Evans, my friend from school, who was also one of that gang, and Roscoe, who'd played in Spacemen 3, and Darren Wisson, who was a friend of mine, and his brother played in a garage punk band that I later played in. But we just used to play like one note. We didn't really have any ambition. We never did any gigs. So I don't know. Was I trying to be like anybody? Kind of Ron Ashton, maybe, out of the Stooges. I kind of liked him. But just simple. See, it was riffs, really, I liked, more than a particular bassist. I learned to appreciate the bass guitar as I played it. I got on with, as I played it, as I got on with it, and as I learned more about it, because I don't think I was a particularly serious bassist, I was working in another factory over there when I got my first paycheck, and I was supposed to go and buy my first bass because I'd been borrowing a bass, and I went to the music shop and bought a banjo. So I turned up at the next rehearsal with a banjo, and they were like, "Why have you got a fucking banjo?" And I was like, I just fancied it. you know. So that's how serious I was about playing the bass. I bought a banjo, you know.
Yes, well, you were probably a bit ahead of your time. So your first band that you were in were called the Cogs of Time. Was this the... No.
That was kind of, I mean, the first band was this band who never had a name, and we just used to rehearse quite frequently and play one note a lot. So we never really had a name. So the first band never really had a name and never did any gigs. Is it still a band if it doesn't do any gigs and never makes any recordings and doesn't have a name? Is that still a band?
It's a bit like when you were young and people used to try and describe what God was, and they went, it's a bit of a gas, I guess. It's more of a concept, isn't it? Really, it's kind of high up.
It's pretty fucking low art, I've found over the years. I have to say some of it. But being in a band, it's fairly easy to. I would say it's quite easy to describe, to define being in a band. Generally, if you're in a room with a few people making loads of noise, you're probably in a band.
Yes.
If there's some drama, you're probably in a band. If you're fucking broke, you're probably in a band. If you're eating crisps by the side of a motorway at 4 a.m, you're probably in a band. I don't know, maybe it is as difficult as defining God.
Yeah, well, I but that's I guess, you know, without the name and any sort of evidence. But then, you know, you've got the memories and the good times with that first concept. So after that one, was your next band called the Cogs of Time?
The Cogs of Time, yeah, the Cogs of Time, which was a garage punk band in Rugby.
Yes.
Yes.
And did that come together quite quickly?
They'd been playing for a while, and I used to enjoy them. I used to go to the gigs. There was always the Reverberation Club, which was on in one of the local bars in the back room, and the Cogs of Time and Spacemen 3 were kind of close associates, and there was a gang of maybe, I don't know, 10 or 12 people with which I was loosely affiliated, and they used to put on a club night there and play, you know, all the psychedelia, all the garage punk stuff, all the blues stuff, that kind of mishmash of stuff that everybody kind of knows now, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with them, and then Gavin recruited me to play bass for them, and I did 2 gigs with them. 2 gigs, one in Birmingham at the Sensitiva and one in the back room of the Blitz. Then I was recruited out.
Yes, you got the transfer, didn't you?
I got quickly recruited, yes.
Did you get headhunted?
It would appear to be the case. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, they headhunted me. There wasn't much of a talent pool in rugby, I guess, for good-looking bassists. So I got the job. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. There weren't that many of us who were into the kind of same sort of music in our town, I suppose, who were on the same page, roughly. You know, we'd all been listening to the similar sort of record. I mean, there was maybe 20 people that used to go to the Reverberation Club regularly, you know, and they were putting on gigs from bands from out of town, you know, from over in Northampton, and so, you know, it was, yeah, I got headhunted.
So what was it like? Because the band, the Spacemen 3, had been going for a bit. What was the dynamic? Yeah. What was it like stepping into a band with a bit of already got some history behind it?
I'd known all of them for, I don't know how many years, but by that point, you know, a while, 2, 3 years, 3, 4, and we were all involved in kind of drugs and music, you know. And what was it like? What was it? I wrote a book about it. It was, you know, fairly daunting in some ways, but I was absolutely enthusiastic for playing music at that point and doing gigs, and I was just desperate to do it. So any opportunity to play, I was going to take. I just really was in love with playing at that point.
Yes. Had they got a record label by then? Were they on?
Yeah, they had 2 records. 2 records had come out on glass already, and then the next one was on fire. So they'd made 2 albums at that point, and I loved the band, you know, and I knew all of Pete Bain and Roscoe and Jason. You know, it's a small town. Rugby's a small town. If you're interested in the kind of things that we're interested in, it's kind of hard not to trip over each other.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. So how did it, because what was that period like, the late 80s kind of musically? Because I know that things sort of shifted quite a lot, towards that world of dance music when, Ecstasy came along and there was kind of the Happy Mondays and, I don't know, Soup Dragons, the Stone Roses, the Orb, did that sort of filter in?
It did. We liked Happy Mondays. I remember listening to the first Stone Roses album because Pete Kember at the time was making his first solo album on Silvertone, which was the Stone Roses first. So I remember hearing an advanced copy of that and an advanced cassette copy of the first Stone Roses album and being like, "Oh, this is going to change things." But we kind of lived in a bubble, really, a little bit. The acid house thing kind of passed us by. We were aware of it, but never really into it. By the time all that kicked in, we'd been doing acid for like 4 years. Do you know what I mean? The last thing you want to do is go stand in a field and do some more fucking acid, to a degree, even though I did, of course. But, I think we'd already earned our stripes by that point, I think. Maybe.
So playing with fire was the album that you worked on with the band.
The first one I did for the Spacemen 3 was Playing with Fire. Yeah.
What was the process, of putting it together?
The process was they'd rented a farmhouse down in Cornwall outside St Austell from a bunch of hippies called Webcore. Webcore, they were kind of like a Hawkwind Traveller band, and they say that house down there, and they're like, yeah, we've got 60, I think it was 8-track studio down there, wasn't it? So Jason and Pete were down there, and they were like, come on, I want you to help us make this record. And I was working at the time, weirdly, in a factory that made bolts for the space shuttle. So I think it was kind of a small leap to actually being in a band called Spacemen 3.
Yes.
So they drove me. I was driven down to Cornwall, and then it was just they'd laid down some backing tracks, and we all kind of lived in this little farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And Jason would go back, and Pete would come back. Sometimes we'd be all there, and sometimes it'd be a couple of us. And, we just made the record, multi-tracked it all. It was all multi-track. There was no live stuff on that. There was no drummer. We had a French drummer briefly turned up. Did one gig, and then that didn't come to fruition. So the rest of that, there's no drummer on that album.
Right. Did it feel like you had created something of a masterpiece at this stage?
A masterpiece? Oh, God, no. When does that ever cross anybody's mind when they're making?
I just wonder when you played it back.
There was a moment when I was listening to the playback of Suicide when we laid the bass down and the drums were on it, and the very start of it made my balls tingle, and I was like, "Oh, I've never had that from music before," and I took that as an auspicious sign, like tingling balls. I've never had it since either, but if you ever get it, it's probably a good sign.
Yes, I think it would. I've never had that experience myself. But,
I'm not a doctor. It wasn't unpleasant. It was neither overtly pleasant nor unpleasant. It was unusual, remarkable. Yes,
it was.
I'm remarking about it to you now. So I suppose if there was a moment, that was it when my balls tingled.
So how was the band managed? Did you have a manager or any sort of leadership?
Leadership. Did we have leadership? Define leadership.
Well, somebody with a kind of a vision and who's able to sort of...
Vision?
Yes.
A managerial vision, an artistic
Well, I suppose
vision.
there's the manager, I suppose some of the bands that we mentioned in the 80s who did go on to great things, they all I think the Police had that guy, Miles Copeland, who had a particular, right, we'll do this, and this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll just keep getting slightly bigger, more money, and things go well, or... Sting probably was very good on that front. I just wondered if the Spacemen 3 ever had that kind of, right, this is good, we'll hit this and then we'll do this. How did it work?
I think most of the ambition within that band was for the music. It really, the idea in 1989 that you could be so fucking overtly druggy and be any kind of a fucking success. It was like, geez, when we used to turn up to do interviews, right? Somebody would roll a joint and the interviewer would look at us like we were mad. It was so unusual. Like before the Happy Mondays kind of normalised all that shit, like the baggy stuff, and Acid House normalised it. We were like fucking freaks for that shit. Pariahs. It was not cool. What we were fucking doing was not cool. So any idea of commercial success, we'd have fucking laughed at you. You know, ambitious for the music, obviously making records. You know, John Peel even trashed the record. He played like 3 records over the top of fucking Roller Coaster. You know, making disparaging comments about it. Even John Peel wasn't down, you know. It's, you know, so ambitious for the music. You know, Pete Gemba was a great driving force in that band. You know, he was very motivated. But you know, I don't think any of us ever thought we were going to be fucking rich.
No. And what was the dynamic?
Go on. Sorry,
I was going to say, were you in the band with Roscoe at that stage?
No, Roscoe and Pete Bain were both out. I came in as they both left.
Right, there you go. And then, because with most bands that I do and have done interviews with, they have a bit of a 5-year narrative. They get together, the 12-month honeymoon period. They get a single, John Peel plays it. They get a John Peel session, then a couple of albums, and then it's all over. What was your story like with the with your first band or your time with Spacemen 3?
Well, my the third gig that I ever played was in Spacemen 3 with My Bloody Valentine supporting us down at Dingwall. So, you know, I was shot out of a cannon into a fairly psychedelic miasma of peculiarity pretty quickly, you know, and arguably that was a band that was at its zenith if it hadn't already passed its peak. And you know, certainly creatively, those two were headed in different ways. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, I was in all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Great, I get to make a record, but you know, they were in the autumn years of the band as I was, you know, a spring chicken.
Yes. Did you all manage to sort of coordinate your drug taking together, or was it a little bit messy?
Yes. No, we were very organised about it. The manager used to send us a schedule. He said, 10 o'clock, smoke some weed. 1 p.m. speedballs.
Right.
It was. No, he didn't. Gerald, he wouldn't see me. I think he'd see the funny side. No, were we coordinated? No, probably not.
Because Hawkwind had that problem, didn't they? They had several members doing acid, some people doing speed, and it just didn't work for them, did it? It was too many kind of different drugs going on. Did you manage to sort of have some sort of unison on drug taking with the band?
Was there some video? I don't think I ever did acid with either of those two. I don't think I ever tripped with either Jason or Pete. Don't think so, which is weird. Did I ever trip with either of them? Did we just smoke a lot of hash, really? You know, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that on the quiet, and then, you know, they weren't, you know, wildly enamoured with people taking amphetamine. So you know, it's mostly just hash, to be fair, for me. Yes. You know, and a little dabble in the other things that are so well documented. You know, it's like, I mean, basically the synchronicity of would be largely to do with availability. So, you know, if we were broke, you know, nobody wants to share their drugs all the time, do they?
No. And was Gerald the manager?
Yes, he was.
And was he an inspiration, or did he sort of navigate the band?
He inspired me later in the band. Certainly inspired me. I wouldn't like to say to what, but he was certainly an inspiration. I mean, he was adequate as a driving force for the band. You know, I guess he did some good deals for himself and for the band because the band did all right. But, you know, I've got to say, Gerald goes a lot of shit, but I tell you, this is a funny fucking story. I've been in how many bands? I don't know, 35 maybe, 35 bands maybe, totally. And the only person that I ever get royalties from, that I've ever received royalties from, is Gerald Palmer, weirdly. Not very much, but he's the only one. So, you know, I don't know. What does that tell you? I
Yeah.
never did no deals. I never signed no deals with them. Do you know? I never signed no deals with anybody. Fuck that. Gerald, man. I mean, me and Embodied Heads quite considerably. You know, during the time that towards the end of that band, me and Gerald butted heads. I took offence to to some of his accounts. And yeah, he didn't really like that. I shouldn't be talking about this. Do you know what? I swore blind I was never going to talk about this shit again. Do you know, I was like, the book's written. I'm not fucking talking about it. I'm fucking sick of it. It's been 30 years. Everybody knows. What have I got to say that's any different? It just always creates trouble. This band is like so fraught with like politics and aggro. It was just like always fucking mad. I've never been in another band that's quite so fucking aggro, which I kind of like about it. It was so dysfunctional. Do you know, it's a band that could, without fail, shoot itself in the nuts. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's still the case now, which I like about it. You know, it's one of the things I find endearing. It was one of the things that drives me the craziest about it.
Good
Self-destruction.
Good times. So okay then. So then, as we sort of step into a new decade, you sort of
decade?
The 90s. The 90s appears. We have the John Major years, don't we? Thatcher leaves. So you leave Spacemen 3. Is that? I mean, was that inevitable?
It was at the time. It was, or it would appear to have been the case that it was inevitable because it fucking happened. And I just had enough really. After a kind of, we made, I don't know, did a lot of touring, made a couple of records, and then I was just tired and broke, and I just fucked it off. Left kind of as recurring was being made, and went to work on a building site to pay off my debts. So,
yes. But then you're back into Spiritualized.
I was, yes. I went back into Spiritualized. Yeah.
And what was that experience like?
Would you like a haiku? Would you like me to condense it into
14
syllables?
Oh, God, I was going to say 16, but 14.
Is it 6? I think, is it 14?
I don't know. It's 14 or 16. It's an even number. Yeah, so how long does that last?
Spiritualized lasted about a year and a half, I guess. So made Laser Guided Melodies, did a lot of touring, started out again kind of doing the smaller gigs and touring in a little van. But it was nice. It was nice to make the music. You know, it was less stressful in some ways. You know.
Yes.
And
And what was the album and recording sessions like? What were they like?
What were the recording sessions like?
Yes,
they were actually very pleasant. The music was good. I was enjoying playing. We were a little more free. There was a little less of the rigid minimalism of Spacemen 3. And I'm not saying that disparagingly at all, but it was a little more florid, spiritualized, a little more curlicued. So I don't know, what was it like? I was enjoying playing, and we were a good band. You know, Johnny is a great drummer. I loved playing with Johnny, and you know, we were kind of experimenting really a bit, which in the early days it felt a bit more experimental. Like we were just like, okay, there's no hard and fast rules to how we sound. You know, there wasn't any of that, which had kind of been set with Spacemen 3. It's like, okay, this is a live set, this is the sound. I mean, on record, it was different with Spacemen 3, but certainly translating that to the live arena was difficult. It was hard to do the quiet stuff, you know. In a small pub, nobody wanted to sit and listen to quiet songs there. You just had to be like, okay, plug it in and turn it up and fuck you off, you know. So with Spiritualized, we kind of were more experimental, really, at the start. And it was nice, you know, I enjoyed making that record.
So this is Laser Guided Melodies, which was on Dedicated Records.
Dedicated Records, exactly, yeah.
It all went well. But then, do you sort of leave, or do you just, I don't know, what happens with the band on that front?
Well, I just left. I had a quick glimpse into the future and decided that I might like a different future. So I just went for a little walk.
Yes.
I went. Yeah.
So did you go into the wilderness to sort of have some biblical kind of experience, or did you just kind of have enough of the music industry at this stage?
I don't know. I got sick of playing somehow, which was kind of a horrible thing because I'd loved playing somehow. I started to confuse playing music with the business of playing music, and it just was no longer a joy to me. So I fucked off,
Yes.
And yeah, that was all right. I was still living next door to Jason, So, but then the record hadn't come out. But I don't know, fancied a change, I've a short attention span, probably.
So after that, so during that 4 years, did you sort of listen to music at all, or did you just kind of?
Yeah, I listened to music. I listened to music a lot. And I had a little 4-track. I cut that around. I mean, I kind of got. It was all the time the poll tax thing, so that kind of went tits up, and then I kind of had the bailiffs after me for a while. So, it wasn't. It was less. It was less a biblical experience, unless there's anything in the Bible about people being pursued by bailiffs. I don't know. I'm not a great student. I'm not a great student of the. Were there any tax collectors? Were there any debtors? I don't know.
I suppose there were debtors, weren't there? In some way, there must have been debt collectors kind of appearing somewhere down the line. But my memory of the story is a bit hazy. I'd have to listen to something by Andrew Lloyd Webber to sort of catch up with a few kind of basic things that happened in his lifetime. But
cats. Are there cats in the Bible?
No, they don't get mentioned. Donkeys get mentioned, but not cats. I think we were on a different musical. I think Jesus Christ Superstar was my go-to more than the one about cats.
There's only one musical, really. There's only one band, isn't there? To tell you an idea of I went into the wilderness for a biblical vision. I had a vision.
Did you?
Yeah, I had a vision of the fucking bailiffs kicking down my door and taking all my shit. So I fucking left before they could do it.
Well, that's, So I hadn't forgot about the poll tax, but I always associate it with much more the early 90s, like 91, 92, than the sort of mid-90s. So
it was that, but then it kicked in, you see. So I'd kind of I'm like, fuck you, I'm not paying it. And then they'd said, well, if you don't pay it, we're going to kick your door in. And then I'd kind of come to an agreement to give them, I don't know, €1 a week of the debt I owed them. And then I defaulted on that. And because if you default on your debt, that's when they can kick your door down. Have you ever had the bailiffs round? You ever had the bailiffs round?
No, I never had the bailiffs experience. I remember trying to avoid door kick down. Thankfully,
it's a good thing to avoid getting your door kicked out. We had a door done once, by the bailiffs for the gas. That was quite disturbing. It's quite an experience it's quite the sound to hear your own front door being crowbarred at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I recommend it to anybody. And then they just go in and shut everything off. I mean, I guess there's going to be a lot of that, isn't there now? Because fuel prices are going through the fucking roof, aren't they?
Yes, I guess we might be reliving those times. I did watch Ted Heath from 1973 doing when he addressed the nation in the winter saying, I'm sorry, but it's all gone a bit tits up and we're not going to have a very good Christmas. And it's just kind of one of those great speeches that one had forgot about. It was only 50 years ago when we thought that was way behind us. But you're right. I think it will all go fucking tits up this winter, really, if it goes up by 80%, I don't think we'll survive. So
I just can't see how people will. I mean, I was recently just I was washing dishes recently, and it's like, okay, it's minimum wage, and a lot of people there who were doing them jobs through the pandemic, I might add, because hey, somebody's got to have the dinner, right? I find them heroic. People that worked in like food shops, I found them heroic during the pandemic. I'm just like, look at this motherfucker completely braving this virus to bring me my fucking pizza. Do you know what I mean? It's not about that, really. It's just about there's nothing else to do, and if you don't do it, he's not going to get any pizza. Do you know? It's not. Is that heroic? I don't know. I found it heroic. That's how stupid. That's my romantic vision. I ended up washing dishes, right? So I'm washing fucking dishes and talking to people there. They're just like, yeah, they're just about scraping by. They're just about paying their rent. And then it's like, okay, when you're just about scraping by, and then all of a sudden your fuel bill is 10% more expensive, and your groceries are 10% more expensive. You don't have any buffer there. Do you know what I mean? So if those people's fucking bills are doubling, it's how the fuck are you going to survive? How the fuck?
Yes, I know. I don't think Liz Truss has got much of a plan, really, apart from to tell us either to get on the bus
or a personality. It seems.
Yeah, I know.
She seems to be. She seems to be a person without a functioning personality to me. You know, it's almost there, but it's been programmed so hard that the bit of Liz Truss that was her, that isn't just like some grotesque, malignant ambition, and an Adele playlist or whatever.
Well, I think yes, I know, because she's been programmed to say this key phrase, which is something about turbocharging the economy, lowering tax.
I love it. I love the turbocharging thing. I need to turbocharge my economy. I need to turbocharge. Are you turbocharging anything at the moment?
I'm not at the moment. I don't feel particularly turbocharging, but I don't feel that confident when she promises quite so many things when she hasn't read the papers. I think it's a bit tricky, isn't it?
A bit fucking Top Gear, isn't it? Turbocharge it. You're going to be like, yeah, we're going to turbocharge it. What does it mean? Does anybody know? Does anybody know what it actually means?
I think we're going to attract investment. Trade with all these other people outside Brexit, because we got Brexit done and that was a massive success. And lower taxes, and it's all going to get rid of red tape.
Get rid of that. Do you know what I love about that phrase? We're going to get rid of red tape, and what it sounds like is that you're opening a delightful supermarket, like you're opening a co-op in a picturesque village. But what you're actually doing is cutting the red tape and allowing a big truck to trundle through and dump shit in your river, because the EU isn't going to fucking stop it anymore. Isn't it great? But I love the sound of it. Cut the red tape. It's just like, I pronounce this co-op open, but it's just like, fuck your seas. Fuck your seas. Rivers. I've got a nice house in fucking Provence.
I must admit, I haven't met a lot of musicians trying to tour Europe thinking that cutting of red tape, it seems to have increased the red tape somehow for the musicians trying to do Europe.
Yeah, what the fuck? What happened to that cutting? It's just been, all of a sudden it's like a big bundle of red tape and it's been wrapped around your neck. And everybody's like, oh, well, at least you got some sovereignty. I didn't talk about this stuff really. I'd stopped talking about it because it was so controversial. It got so controversial, and it was just like I spent all my time arguing on Facebook, which I felt wasn't really the best way to spend my life, my autumn years.
But it's not really controversial, the fact that everyone who's a musician or band has just said, well, the red tape that has theoretically gone has just increased, but without
it's a fucking nightmare. It's a fucking nightmare. I hope somebody's enjoying it somewhere. That's all. I'm just really hoping somebody's enjoying it, because I'm not, and not many of my friends are either. It's going to make life. It's going to make a really difficult job even more fucking difficult for a lot of bands in the UK, and I think it's a pity. Do you know? And I don't. But did they think about anything? You know, did they fucking give a fuck about anybody except for their tax avoiding mates? You know what I mean? And avoiding the European anti-money laundering laws, which came in on the 1st of January, coincidentally. Oh, is it a coincidence? No, I don't think it fucking well is. But, they didn't write about that in the Sun, did they, funnily enough?
No.
I didn't see much coverage of that. I was supposed to be fucking absolutely riddled with fear at the idea of some poor fucking refugee crossing the channel on a blow-up boat and a Polish nurse, right? I'm like, mate, they're not making the fucking laws. The reason you're in this shit, right, is not some poor fucking Syrian crossing the channel in a blow-up boat and a Polish nurse. They're not making your fucking laws. But, sovereignty, what does it mean? Does anybody know?
No, but I think
No.
but Boris did say we were going to reintroduce having was it old measures back like the pint, but I didn't realise the pint had been removed.
So you didn't even know it had gone. You didn't even know it had gone. That's it. That's creeping like anti-Britishness. That's what that is. You didn't even realise you'd lost it. That great pillar of culture. I had a pint glass. I had a pint before Brexit. I'm sure I had one.
You never asked for a litre, did you? You just went to have a pint.
Oh, fucking hell. Jeez, I'm not sure how I feel now. I was in Belfast. It's funny because I've been in Ireland. I was in Ireland a fair bit recently, and I was living in Belfast. Because of culture, I was like involved with this arts organisation in Donegal, County Donegal, now we're doing readings for the book. I've completely destroyed your timeline for questioning. You had such a nice timeline. I've derailed it, haven't I? Sorry. And then, so I was in Belfast, right? And I was never been to Belfast. And they're like, do you want to come and DJ in Belfast, right? And I'm like, oh my God, Donegal. Only ever heard about Belfast on the TV when it was bad news. Do you know what I mean? So there's like that weird kind of 80s me, just like, oh. And I went up there and I stayed for like fucking 3 months. I was only supposed to be there a night. It was great. But, being on that border and hearing some of the history there, and then thinking, geez, anything that would put that into jeopardy, that fragile piece into jeopardy, I'm just like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? And people there were just in disbelief. They're just in disbelief, a lot of them. My friends, and they're not overtly political people. A lot of these fucking musicians, normal people like everybody else. It's like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I remember that. I'm not that great on that history, but I do remember watching a documentary, which doesn't sound great. But I do remember there was one of those kind of bands, like who were crossing the border, and they just got sort of pulled over and all shot because of that. And they weren't like a rock band. They were just kind of one of those.
Is that a Stephen Travers? They're one of the club bands, eh?
The club bands.
That's a Stephen Travers book. That was it's a shocking fucking story. That is shocking story.
That is not. No, it's not a good story, is it? That brings.
It's just frightening, I mean, you hear the stories up there. It's like that wasn't the reason I was there. They're keen to move past that, and there's a really good art scene up there, really good music scene. People are really committed, really decent. I met a lot of really decent folks up there, I have to say.
Yes.
With a wicked piss-taking sense of humour. They'll all be taking the fucking piss out of me if they hear this, Like, yeah, you think you know it all now, don't you? You know nothing, you fucking English cunt. I was like, I'm mainly Welsh. I was like, I'm not English, I'm mainly Welsh, They're like, yeah, you sound it. Like. But, I don't know. It's just I don't know. I hate to bang on about it because it's Brexit it's been done now, isn't it? So what's the point of fucking crying? Yeah. It's just done, isn't it? Got to just eat it, suck it up, get that big piece of shit on a spoon and just suck it all up. Well, should we talk about music again?
Yeah. So look, then we had the John Major years going towards dear old Team Tony. Let's keep it political. Then you get a phone call back from your old mate Gavin, didn't you, to go back into another band?
Yes, because I'd been hitchhiking around the country and generally living in caves and small buildings. And yeah, Gavin was like, do you want to come and play again? Because I was busking with him. He actually got me back into playing music he had a T-chest bass. So he convinced me to play the T-chest bass. So he would go busking in Rugby Town Centre. And I'd play a T-chest bass and he'd play the guitar. And we'd do like psychedelic classics, busking psychedelic classics on a T-chest bass and acoustic and his electric guitar. So what did we do? Summertime is here, kiddies, and it's time to take a trip. We'd busk these like weird psychedelic songs.
Excellent.
A few Bo Diddley songs, which didn't really go down well with most of the people going past. We didn't make much money. I remember coming off one session, playing T-chest gives you nasty blisters, like it's fucking hard work. I think we had about £2 and some kids threw some biscuits at us. That was the limit of the rewards for that 2 hours, but it was good fun because we enjoyed the songs. So anyway, Gavin did that, and then he's like, come and play in the Guaranteed Ugly. He got me into the Guaranteed Ugly. And then we went and did some gigs. They had a record deal with Hangman, which is Billy Childish's label, and the Head Coats and Damaged Goods and all that stuff. So we'd go down and play with the Head Coats because Billy Childish loved the Guaranteed Ugly, weirdly. So we were playing down in London with them once a month for about a year and a half, supporting the Head Coats and the Head Coatees, and the Armitage Shanks used to play down there. Who else used to play? Solar Flares, and who else? I'm going to forget some people. Get trouble. Sexton Ming,
right?
Mark Perry from ATV would come down, do a turn. He'd do Action Time and Vision with the Head Coats, and Mickey from the Milkshakes was always there, and it was a generally hilarious time. About 97, I guess that was just before Jack White and the White Stripes got involved with all that and all the toe rag thing. But they were fucking brilliant gigs. They're some of the most fun gigs over there. And we used to play first. So we played first, and then it'd be Armitage Shanks and the Head Coats, and the Head Coatees would come on after them. So they were just brilliant nights, really, really interesting, unusual nights, you know.
Yes. Was that a musical highlight during that period?
It was just one of those. It was one of those moments when that scene was great. You know, like there was moments when the Spacemen stuff was great. There's moments when Spiritualized stuff was great, and they don't stay at the. I don't want to say the peak because they change and they have peaks and troughs. But there's a moment when it's like not. It's I don't know. There's moments when things are fucking great. You know what I mean? For me personally, I don't know.
Yes.
I like them when they're odd, when they're not quite defined. Maybe, do you know, when something's not been there hasn't been an accepted definition. I like things when they're kind of forming in a way. I don't know. They were great nights. And it was just good fun, dancing, and the bands were fucking great, and the vibe was great, and it was really a fun year down there with that lot. They're a good bunch, you know.
Well, it's always good to have a zeitgeist moment, really, isn't it?
It's good to have a few, I think. You know, if you can fit them in.
If you can fit them in.
If you can catch the waves, you know, if you can stand the hangovers, you do all right. They were fucking great nights. So it was like Kira and Holly Go Lightly down there, and you know, they were fucking great. They were really good fun gigs. Really.
And this is the Dirty Water Club, right?
Yeah. Really good though. Really good night.
How did that putter out?
I don't know. For me personally, I think what happened? Did it putter out? No, it kept going. I mean, it kept going. It got bigger, didn't it? I mean, there was White Stripes, and then they started recording a toe rag. So, you know, Billy Childish now obviously is a fairly big name, and they kept going. But I just left the Guaranteed Ugly. You know, I went off with Spectrum again.
Right. For another.
I tell you a funny fucking story though about one of them Head Coats gigs. Right? I'd been at a road protest down in Le Minge in Kent, right? So I was living in a treehouse trying to stop the developers chopping the fucking forest down, right? So I was down there and I hitchhiked back to London to do a gig with Guaranteed Ugly, right? So I'm hitchhiking back from Le Minge to get in. I arrived at the venue before the band, right? So I get in and Billy Childish was there, and I was like, fuck me, I bought a copy of The Big Issue. Right, on the way up, and there was an interview in there with Tracy Emin. Right, this is my claim to fame now. It's becoming my tawdry claim to fame. So there's an interview with Tracy Emin, and it was her tent, right, and it had his name. And she wasn't very well known at the time, and I was like, "Check this out, Billy. Your fucking name's in her tent." And he went, "Fucking hell, Tracy." So I like to think that was that was probably my major cultural influence, telling Billy that Tracy put his name in her tent.
I mean,
do I get any credit for it? No.
God, I know. It's just, I know.
It's tragic. It's tragic.
It is. It is sad, actually. We'll have to write a song about it. So then, what's Spectrum like?
What are Spectrum like? What were they like?
What was it like? What was it like for you?
Well, I'd been doing the Guaranteed Ugly thing, and then Pete was like, "Do you want to come on tour in America?" Right. And I'm like, "Ooh, that sounds exciting and glamorous." And I'm probably forgotten how difficult it's going to be. So yeah, I should do it. I'll probably do it. And then it was like, it's not too many dates. No. And then it was like 6 weeks around America. So then we were touring Forever Alien, which is a fairly uncompromising kind of electronic album, which is perhaps not what some of the audience were expecting over there. So we're kind of playing this baffling electronica to baffled crowds sometimes. I mean, I really like those sets. I like the set. There's one on YouTube, Live at the Black Cat, which is pretty good, you know, if you're interested. But the Forever Alien stuff's fairly. We did a couple of Spacemen songs, but it was fascinating, you know, to drive all the way around America.
Yes, 6 weeks. That is pretty hard going.
A fairly long tour, yeah, it was. And he was collecting speaking spells at the time, as I recall.
Blimey, Jesus Christ! Did you? Because most people break up from bands after the tour in America. What was it like when you came back from that experience?
Got a job at a nursery packing blackthorn saplings. Have you ever packed a blackthorn sapling?
No,
they're terrible. You get these little pricks in you, and they go fucking septic pricks. Yeah, it's bad.
I've packed roses for a couple of, well, probably
similar, very similar
in a sort of nursery. And
imagine it.
It was an evening job. I needed a bit more cash, and I did it with some very strange people who had been there for decades. And I was thinking, this is awful. You know, that was kind of, you don't want to go back there, do you?
No, what was fascinating about that job? It was around the time when, do you remember the BSE thing?
Yes.
The mad cow thing. And they were just like, what are they doing with these mad cows and their indestructible prions? And they were sticking them in, they were burning them down the cement factory actually in Rugby, I heard. I don't want to disturb any of your listeners. But and then we were working that job with the blackthorns. And there were these sacks, these unmarked sacks of vile smelling kind of fertilizer arrived. And I was saying, my boss was like, what the fuck are these sacks? I was like, why do they smell so bad? He was like, and I was like, this is those fucking mad cows, isn't he? He looked at me horrified. I'm just like, so I have a theory. So we just spread the mad cows on the roses. probably completely unfounded. I had Randall from a band called Fuchsia in America. He was in Rugby briefly, and he wanted me to lay a bass line down for him around this time. I had a little 8-track recorder. So he came around the house and we're laying the bass line down, and I was like, do you know where the power is coming from to drive this machine? And he was like, no. And I was like, they're burning cows. He was like, what the fuck? And I was like, yeah, cow power. Cow power, Randall. That's what everything works on in Britain. Diseased cow power. So yeah, we still talk about that, meaning.
I don't blame you.
Sorry,
Right?
anyway,
that's quite something, isn't it? Yeah. So after the blackthorn years in the nursery, what's your next
6 months?
6 months.
My next career move. What was my next career? What was it? Oh, that's a good question. What was it about 97, 98? Made a solo album, I think, around then. Did I make it after that or before? I can't remember. I was crashed into, got some compensation. I bought a little 8-track, made solo records, put that out myself, built a website, put them in the post.
Did you collaborate with the Flowers of Hell?
Yes, I played with the Flowers of Hell, and I did a live show with them as well, but in Austin Sightfest. Yeah.
Yes. What was that experience like?
It was great. It was good. He just asked me to come down and put a bass line down, and I was in London, and he was one of his partners. His partner at the time was in a band called the Priscillas. So I was hanging out with the Priscillas, which was really good fun down in London. We turfed somebody's car, as I recall. I wouldn't like to give you the details about that, but we definitely turfed somebody's car. And then Greg was like, will you come and give me a bass line? So I was like, of course, Greg. So I turned up brutally hungover. He poured a bit down enough for my hands to stop shaking, and I played some bass lines for him. And there we are. That's how that happened.
Fantastic. Yeah. What a band. They are amazing, I have to say.
Yeah, good band. I played with them as well in Austin at Psych Fest over there, which was really a funny one. That was really, because I wanted to see the elevators.
Right.
And I was at a particular low point in my life, and I was looking at the internet thinking, is there anything I want in any of this? And it was like, holy fuck, the 13th floor elevators playing. How am I going to get to Austin? There's no way on earth. I've got no money. No way I'm going to get there. And then literally, synchronistically, Greg Shaw was like, is there any bass players in Austin? And I was like, I'll fucking do it, Greg. I'll play bass for you at that gig, but you got to get me a ticket. And he was just like, oh, there's no budget. So he did. Fair play to him. He stomped a ticket. So I flew to fucking Austin. It was pretty funny because I turned up, I had no money. I just had like 5 handmade books. I was like, if I can sell my handmade books, I can probably eat. Right? I'm going to do this gig, but I want to see the 13th floor elevators. I was determined. Right? I turned up a fucking customs. Right? I've got my 5 handmade books in a bag. And the guy at customs was like, oh, he's Sherlock, because I had my Sherlock Holmes on. He was like, what's in the bag? It's just like books, which is not strictly legal, because I was swapping them for a bed. Is that commerce? Is that arguably fucking, is barter commerce? Not really. So he's looking through them, he's opening the books, and I was like, for fuck's sake, don't read the story about me smoking crack with a prostitute. You know what I mean? And her mother, I'd like to point out in my defence, it was entirely innocent. I was just smoking crack with her and her mother. Probably fiction. It's all fucking fiction. The only thing real is the hallucinations. Anyway, sorry, where were we? I digress.
Yeah, so you were trying to sort of navigate the customs chap. Woman.
Yes, yeah.
With your 5 books.
With my 5 handmade books. In the end, I was like trying to put him off reading the story, the incriminating stories, by nudging him. And then he was like, okay, on you go. And then as I walked off, one of the other customs agents went, where's your pipe? And I was immediately thinking crack pipe, because I'd been thinking about him not reading the story about the prostitute. And I was like, pipe? And he went, yeah, your pipe, your bendy pipe, Sherlock. And I was like, oh, yeah. See, we're on a different page. We were on a different page at that point. Anyway.
You were in that sort of film, weren't you? God, the one in Turkey, Midnight Express, weren't you?
No, thankfully not. Thankfully, I've not. I've been luckier than that. So it's the Sherlock Holmes, I think.
Yes, but there was that scene where he's at the airport, and I think someone shouts, and he's so wired up.
Yeah, no, it's just like, I think I've got a guilty demeanour anyway. I just feel guilty most of the time. I think it's probably, I don't know, why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Is it because, I don't know. And there's that thing, it's like drugs make you paranoid, isn't it? That's what they say. Drugs make you paranoid. That's what they always told us. Drugs will make you paranoid. I was like, actually, I was probably more paranoid because we would all of a sudden, like lawbreakers. Do you know what I mean? All of a sudden, the police are actually after you. Do you know what I mean? You are breaking the law all the time. You go from being fairly law-abiding, might have, infringed on a few road bylaws on my BMX, to being like a full-on fucking law.
Yes.
Inadvertent as well, I thought.
So then,
anyway, go on. Where were we?
Yeah, so chronologically, from there, with the Flowers of Hell and your solo work, you end up with the Brian Jonestown Massacre. How does this one sort of come together?
Oh, yeah, how does that one come together? There's all sorts of links and other ones in there that kind of link it together. But Ricky from the Jonestown, who'd been who enjoyed Spacemen 3 and had come to rugby early on and was kind of friends with Pete Kember, and who had met on the Spectrum tours in America, was a friend of mine. We remained friends, and he was like, do you want to come? And I was living in my friend's garage. This all sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's so hard to link it all on.
You've lived in a lot of places, haven't you?
Yeah, I really have. Yeah, I've moved. I think I've moved. I don't know. I think I've moved about 25 times in the last 5 years.
Yes. Is this a slightly more settled setup you've got now?
No. More settled than what? Like if I told you this, I don't know. I like to tell people where I was, and I like to tell people where I am these days, because people have an unhealthy obsession with where you are, I find.
Yeah, no, that's not a good one, is it really? But yes, but you do manage to move around with quite sort of ease, fluidity, which is quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. I have no idea how I do it. I just no idea. I mean, what I'm doing now, I'm just like doing a bit of construction. Get a few skills. That's my advice. The more skills you have, the more kind of transferable you are. If you talk about transferable skills, but I think it's important to be a transferable person.
Yeah,
it's like I can cook. I can do a bit of drywall for you. I can do a bit of plastering if necessary. And as a result of living such a kind of chaotic life in which I've had to adapt, you pick up skills that make you more adapted for that chaotic life. If you're lucky, you don't fucking die or get eaten by a bear or something.
Yes, well, absolutely. That's. But then, that is quite a skill, just to keep going and to not let it grind you down. Do you ever sort of get down with the lifestyle that you've lived?
I think I have moments of profound despair, but I've always had them. It doesn't matter what I'm fucking doing. I can have them. It can be the nicest day, and I can have a moment of profound despair. Do I? Occasionally I think, yeah, maybe looking at my autumn years, and perhaps I could have planned for them a little more thoroughly. But you know what? In some ways, I think maybe my skills are a greater insurance than what other people might be considered to be safety. I mean, where's security? Where does security lie? Where does it really lie? In you, in the things you own, in clean fucking water, in your ability to fucking, get across a mountain safely, I don't know. It changes, doesn't it? It's interesting. You talk to people, and life can change. And I don't know. Yeah, I do regret it. Sometimes I wish I had a house. It would be nice to have slept in a place that I owned. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I think, I wonder what that feels like. Because, I never experienced that. I feel like, this is mine. But then, I've got a fucking tent.
That's good. And with the cost of living crisis, you might have more skills than the average person. Well, you will have, won't you? The survivability could be key for this next winter. I think this is it, really. So
I really don't know, but I don't know. But do I regret things? Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I do regret something. And could life be easier? But it ain't too bad. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous and it's hard sometimes, but it's essentially satisfying to me. I think the world would be an awful place if everybody lived like I do. But then probably, if we're all the fucking same, it'd be an awful place, whoever.
Yes.
I don't know.
So what was because you did 2 albums with the Jonestown Massacre, didn't you?
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
You're asking me to encapsulate worlds in a sentence, which is difficult. What was it like? Working with the Jonestown was good. I was living in my friend's garage, wasn't I? Let me take us back to the thread. I was living in my friend's garage, and then I got the call saying, "Do you want to support the Jonestown?" So I was doing my little solo. I think I made my second album. I made that in an abandoned office block in Leicester. So I made that album, and then I was living in a garage in Toronto, and I got the offer to go and support the Brian Jonestown Massacre with my acoustic guitar, which I did, And it was around the time just after Dig, so they had fairly boisterous audience, and I was on the bus with them, and I got on well with them, and I got on well with Anton, and that was all good. The tour went well, and then afterwards, their bass player was getting married, and they needed somebody to fill in because they wanted to tour. So they offered me the job. So I toured with them. I did like a 6-week tour around Europe and off to America with them. So that would have been around, what year was that? 2006, 2007, 2008, around then. And then, And then that finished. I did the quick tour, and then Anton was like, come to Berlin and make a record with me. You know, help me make a record. So I went over there, and he was working on, at the time, he was finishing up Who Killed Sergeant Pepper, and I was working at the Funk House, which is an old East German recording facility on the edge of Berlin, which at the time was largely abandoned. So me and him kind of used to roam the corridors, and it was just me and him, really, you know, just in the studio all fucking night for weeks. I didn't do much, to be honest. He just does it. I'm just kind of moral support, you know what I mean? It's like fucking whatever. You know, he's like, right, lay the bass, lay the thing. I'm just like, whatever. You know, it's like it takes me fucking 3 days to put a bass line down, do you know what I mean? Those bass lines for Lady Guided Melodies, I'd sit there and work out for 2 fucking days, you know. And he wants it done in 10 minutes, so I work very differently. It was good working with him. I enjoyed it, you know. It was an interesting and occasionally challenging time. And, you know, it was interesting.
So what was you did the album Who Killed Sergeant Pepper? What was the other album you worked on?
Alfhaven. Some of the stuff I played on was on Alfhaven. So,
yes.
Do you know that one? Alfhaven was the album after Who Killed Sergeant Pepper.
Sure, I've got you. But before that, you were in your solo work was called Free Love Babies, wasn't it?
Free Love Babies. I made 2 albums with that. So I just made the second album in the abandoned office block in Leicester. And then I'd moved to Toronto. I was living in the garage, and then I got the call to go and support the Jonestown. It all sounds very glamorous, doesn't it?
So
Does it sound glamorous?
How did you get just amazed at how did you get a call to say let's go to Toronto and live here? What was because
my mate Davey live, I'd been touring with Spectrum. I'd met Davey, and Davey was a promoter in Toronto, and I'd been living in Rugby for a while, and things got a bit shitty, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And Davey's like, come to Toronto, stay with me, I've got a spare room. Bang, it'd be brilliant. So I just kind of fucking moved over there with very little. Well, I did was like, okay, this will be fine. You know, fingers crossed, let's go for it. And then, I went there, and then I went back to Britain, and then I made the album, and then I went back to live in his garage again. He'd moved, and he didn't have a spare room then, so I moved into his garage. I was living in Davy's garage. It was all right.
Yes.
Pissing in bottles, though. There's no toilet. It's really difficult. Have you ever pissed in bottles?
Yeah, because I lived in one of those terraced houses, which was quite high, and the toilet was in the basement, so you were just never going to go down 2 flights of really narrow, steep stairs. So you got a bottle and you pissed in it.
You become uniquely aware of the capacity of your own bladder. Until you have to do things like that, why would you even care how much is in there?
Or the colour. You become fascinated with...
you obviously became... it was always volume for me, because if you're running out of bottles, if you only got 1 bottle, just think if you've never been in that position, you would never know the panic.
Well, also, the other thing is, and I don't know if you did this, but I did, which then I got caught. I used to tip it out the window and think, oh, that's fine. And then one day someone said, God, there's a really horrible pissy smell out the front door. And it was like, it's like, oh my God, they've rumbled me. They know that's me. It was like, because you just went, I'm just going to tip it out and do it the next day, don't you, or the next night? So there you have it.
Why would you tip it out of the window?
Because it was like too much effort to go down to the toilet holding this kind of, liter or this plastic bottle. You just thought, I can't be bothered. Because you're slummy. You've kind of got no class and one's got no hygiene. Well, I'm talking about myself. And so you just went, I'll just tip it out the window quickly, go to sleep. I need a piss. And then you do it. And then the next day, and you do this for a while and you think, this is all good. It's not like you're committing a crime. You're just being very disgusting. Not
a crime. It's not a crime. It could be a crime in some place. I couldn't do it because I was in a garage and I had no windows.
No,
so I'd have to go. I mean, do you know what? Thinking about it, I could have gone out and tipped it out behind, but I was like, No, it was difficult because if I came to the limit of how did we get to be talking about this? Because living in the fucking garage, isn't it? And then the bottles, the Jonestown. Should we go back to the Brian Jonestown? Your listeners don't care about this, surely.
They will.
Who's
listening? Someone think, God, this has gone a bit strange. There's never heard this on a podcast before. Yes. That's fine. So the Brian Jones, but you were talking about and I said, how did you manage to suddenly get a phone call to go to Toronto?
Just because Davey asked me to go over there, and then I ended up there, and I was hanging out with Dan Burke in Toronto. Do you know him? He's a big promoter. He's putting on shows at the Silver Dollar, and Davey used to run a club called Blow Up over there. So, and what else? What did we do? Me and him went fishing out on Whitefish Lake, which is about 4 hours north of Sudbury. Went out on a boat, staying with his father-in-law. Yeah, his goddaughter. I'm his daughter's godfather, God help her. I said, I'm just like God. I'm completely absent, probably fictional. Just kidding.
That was a good line. I like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's why I thought I'd share that one with you. So yeah, that was how it. And then that was 2 albums. Where were we? I get confused myself.
Yeah, so that was Canada, which was God knows actually. That was after or before the Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Just before.
So you had that experience that took you up to the
because I got a phone call. I was in the garage and Davey knocked on the door and said, "There's a phone call for you," because I didn't have a phone. And I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "I don't know." So he gave me the phone, and it was the Brian Jonestown Massacre's manager saying, "Do you want to come on tour?" And I was like, "Why not? I'm in a garage. Why not go on tour?" On tour. It's just
so where do you store your stuff at this stage? Do you sort of lose it and then have to buy new stuff, or do you just kind of leave it in someone's lockup and then go, "Oh, right, I must just pick it up"? And
I have little piles of stuff around. I have less piles of stuff. I just sold my bass guitar. That was one of my biggest bits of stuff that I've had left. So I got rid of that. That was quite a relief. I've got very little stuff, actually. I've got hardly any stuff. I got rid of most of it. I used to leave it in piles, but then you get back and it's all gone mouldy. So I just like, fuck leaving it. You just learn to have little. I've mostly got art materials now, do you know? Got a few clothes, got a laptop, little microphone, paper, loads of paints. Depends. Art's fucking heavy, do you know what I mean? But yeah, I don't. What stuff do you need? There's stuff fucking everywhere. Everybody's like, "What about your stuff?" And I'm like, if you start looking at stuff as actually yours and just be like, "Okay, I need some stuff." There's no fucking shortage of stuff in the world, is there? You know,
no,
go down the beat, stuff fucking everywhere.
There's too much.
It's not like. Has anybody ever said, "Oh my God, there's a stuff shortage"?
Not in our lifetime.
No, it's unlikely to happen.
It's not going to happen, is it? No.
We're all fucking mad for stuff. I don't have much.
Yeah. So look, then you write a book. How does this come about? Because you get a publishing deal with Faber and Faber, don't you?
You see, you leap in. There's a fair ramp. There's a fair ramp into that story. So around 2014, after the Jonestown, I'd been playing in an Icelandic band, which we'll just skip over the Dead Skeletons for a minute. But I was just writing. I'd been writing poetry when I got to Toronto because I didn't know what the fuck else to do. I started to write poetry because I thought this is going to be a great career move, because who doesn't want to hear poetry from the bass player of a band that about 12 people have heard of? So it wasn't that. I had this poetry. I'm like, "Fuck, what's poetry? I'm going to make a book. I could put it together, staple it together and knock it out. Or I could learn to make like a hardback book." So I learned to make handmade books. I started making them. So I made like 130 handmade poetry books, and I sold them again through my website. And then I wrote another book of short stories, and I handbound that, and I sold 130 of them on the website and just put them in the post to people, and it was all lino printed and to do all that. I like to do that. And then I was going to write another book. I decided I'm going to write another book. So I moved to Croatia, Zagreb. Because somebody had said, I've got a spare room for you. Right? Basically, it's like that. If you got a cheap room, I'll fucking move in, do you know? A free room, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Whatever. I was in Zagreb, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go there, right? But I had absolutely no way of knowing that I was going to survive over there. I had very little money coming in, very little, and I'm just like, okay, I don't have to pay rent. I can just live on bread and water if necessary. Do you know? I'm just going to sit in a room, write a fucking book. So I'm there, and I'm like, I don't know how far I was into it. I don't know, 4,000 words into it. And then my brother, I have a Dutch brother, and he's a literary manager in Holland, in The Hague, and he manages Dutch writers, big Dutch writers. And he said, I think I can pitch this to Faber. And I'd kind of been friends with Lee. I was aware of Lee Braxton, who was working at Faber and was publishing the books through Twitter, and I'd kind of had a couple of little interactions with him, and I think he knew that I was writing these books. So my brother, bless him, found Lee and laid one of my handmade books on Lee, who promptly fucking lost it. I think he lost the handmade book that was given to him, but he was then presented with 3 chapters, and he read 3 chapters from my previous book. And then I got a call from him in Zagreb going, do you want to write a book for Faber? And I was like, yeah, fucking, I'd really like to be able to pay my rent. It'd be great. So that would be good. So I just did it. And he was like, when will it be finished? I was like, in about a month. It took me 2 months to write a book. I just sat in that fucking room. I was like, 8 hours a day. I was like, talk to me. Don't do fuck all. Banging my daffodil. Do you know what I mean? Do you know that shit, fighter pilot speed, is really not a good idea for a man of my age, but it fucking got that book finished quickly, I'll tell you that. And then, yeah, I wrote that, went back, edited it in Berlin, bing, bong, bing. Then I got evicted. And I made some handmade copies of that, like 130 of them. And I was working down at Battanian, which is like this old squatted orphanage in Berlin. I was working down in the cellar there, finishing the books and learning Japanese stab binding. And then I went on the road, so I've been on the road for like 5 years.
Amy, that is amazing.
Yeah.
That is incredible. It couldn't quite catch. What was that thing about the fighter pilots you mentioned?
Fighter pilot speed. Modafinil, yeah, I edited the book. I copy edited the book because you have to copy edit. You write the book, then you rewrite it. Then it's like 3 writes. You have to do 3 drafts. It's a lot of fucking work. You get 3 drafts and then you copy edit. So to get through the final draft and a copy it, I was like doing modafinil. I believe they use it as a study aid now. It's like,
right. Jesus.
One of those.
And it's kind of, you just mentioned you were in an Icelandic band before that.
Dead Skeletons, yeah. Dead Skeletons. I don't know how the fuck I ended up. Well, I do know how I ended up in an Icelandic band because I'd been to, let me think about this. It's hard to keep track myself, to be honest. So I'd been on a Jonestown tour when I've been touring with them, and when we played at Glastonbury, Nonny, who was as an Icelandic artist, had done a song with a Jonestown called Golden Frost. So he'd sung on it. It was this vaguely terrifying kind of song. And he came and sang that at Glastonbury. So I got to know Nonny. And then at the end of the Jonestown tour, it's a very long and rambling story, sorry. The end of the Jonestown tour, I'd picked up with a guy called Ryan Van Cree, and he'd been like, where you going? I don't know, I'd gone to Philly. I'd stayed with Ryan from a band called Asteroid Number 4 in Philly. And then from Philly, Ryan was going to Iceland. I was like, you should meet this guy I know called Joan Simon there, Nonny. So, okay, give him the phone number. And then we went our separate ways, and I didn't see Ryan till 4 years after that when I got off the plane in Iceland to see both him and Joan picking me up to go and be in Dead Skeletons, which was the band that Ryan and Nonny had formed with Henrik Bjornsson after they'd visited him there. So that's a peculiar circularity. If that makes any sense, I'm not sure if I really
amazing. How long did that kind of adventure last?
Have a guess how long it lasted, given my history.
12 months.
Just over 12, about 2 years. We did a few gigs and we made a live album live in Berlin. And I honestly think that's probably the last full band I'll ever be in. and it seems appropriate, somehow.
Yes. Wow, it's a great. So with the book that came out about 4 or 5 years ago, that's just kind of you're doing readings. So what's your latest kind of projects that you're working on after the wonderful world that was lockdown last year and the year before?
What am I doing at the moment? I'm mainly publishing through my Patreon. I'm just working through there. I've got a couple of books of poetry I'm going to finish. I'm going to make them again and put them out through there. What else am I doing? I've been painting a lot, actually. Painting and making lino cuts during lockdown. I was making a lot of linoleum cuts, which I got into through making the handmade books. So I got into kind of lino printing and through that into painting. I've been painting. So, I just carry on doing that shit, painting and writing and making books and trying to keep my head above water. But it's mainly going out through the Patreon. Most of the artwork goes out through there and through my website as well.
Yes.
When I can be bothered. I've been gilding my lino. I've been gilding my lino cuts. It's really funny because I got back to Berlin and I was like, okay, I've got this huge collection of lino cuts that I've used to print, and I haven't quite got the heart to throw them out. There's a lot of work carving them, and they're hand carved, and then you print off the hand carved plates, and you're supposed to throw them away when you've taken your limited run of prints, but I can't quite bring myself to throw them away. So I was like, fuck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gild them. I've been learning to gild. So I've been gilding my old lino cuts and trying to find good homes for them, because I have a great incentive, because I'm so, what's the word? I wander, because I'm prone to peregrination. I have a very good incentive to get rid of all the artwork that I fucking make. I don't want to keep it. If you've got to carry it, you become acutely aware of how valuable it is to you.
Yes. This is true.
It's remarkable the way that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So is it the case then that your music days have gone, or are you just waiting for the next phone call?
I do a few sessions. I was playing in the pubs over in Ireland. They convinced me to learn a few Irish folk songs, so I'd play a few of them, and I'll sing if there's people around and there's somebody buys me a whiskey. And I've been actually putting some stuff out again through the Patreon, and I've just kind of started doing some weird little drone poems through the Patreon, which I've been doing literally the last 2 weeks. I haven't done any multi-track recording at home for years, and I just got back into it the last 2 weeks. So they're going out through the good supporters I have. It's got me through fucking lockdown completely. Those fuckers got me through lockdown, because it was a fairly tricky time. But so I don't know. The bands, I just can't imagine. My ears are damaged, to be honest, after years of working in heavy industry and working in heavy bands. I have brutal tinnitus and hyper acuity, so that some certain frequencies are painful to me. So for me to stand next to a drum kit is difficult now.
Yes.
Even with earplugs, I tried it with Dead Skeletons towards the end of those tours. I was wearing plugs all the time, and it just wasn't really helping, and it became an unpleasant experience to play like loud music. But whereas before I was like absolutely in love with it. It's just, if you're recoiling from that sound you used to run to, it's probably time to do something else, So
yes. And it does sound like you've got an amazing ability to reinvent yourself, or at least got to develop new skills, which is apparently one of the most important things we have in life, is to keep, finding new things to do. It keeps you, I don't know, doesn't keep you young, but I think it keeps you very sort of stimulated.
It keeps the brain supple. Just keep the brain supple. Don't let it never ossification. I just don't want to ossify, It's like, and it kind of keeps my enthusiasm up to like, okay, that's a new thing, and that's a new thing. And I don't know, I'm probably fucking ADHD or something. There's probably some clinical reason for it's probably, it's not a gift. It's just a byproduct of my my what's the word? Jesus, I've gone soft in the brain. I think the lockdowns made me soft in the brain. It's a byproduct of my condition, probably.
Yes, this could be true. But if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out in this wonderful world, is there anything that you would have said, look, this is a good bit of advice because frankly, Mr. Shankly, you might need to remember this later on? Is there anything that you would have just whispered or spoke, even if they ignored you?
Share needles.
There you go. Don't share needles. Yes.
Yeah. At 16, that would have been really. I wouldn't have listened. I really wouldn't have listened. But it would have been good advice. No, my good advice would be, okay. For me, at which point in my life?
Well, I suppose as you was, with all the experience you've had and all those kind of journeys and adventures, I just wondered what kind of key kind of bits that you would think, God, that's something that I've learned that I would tell my younger self, starting out.
Don't worry, Tim. I don't know. What would I tell myself? That's such a difficult question. What advice would I give to myself that I would have taken that? I know I wouldn't have taken it. Don't worry about money. Do you know what? There was a certain point in my life I used to worry about fucking money. And I was like, hang on. It's like, you've made it this fucking far and your worry hasn't made you any richer. It just hasn't made you any richer. It's just made you fucking miserable. You're like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And it's just like, believe in... I don't know. I wouldn't, because the advice I would give myself, how would I want to do anything different? Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure I would. There's certain things, like don't drink all that whiskey on that particular full moon, maybe, occasionally.
Yes. And you did say earlier about learning lots of skills because they'll come in useful.
Yeah, but I did that anyway, do you know what I mean? Purely by accident of fortune and misfortune sometimes. Do you know
yes.
What I mean? What seemed like misfortune. What seemed like misfortune sometimes wasn't. Or the skills I learned in misfortune became useful later on. Do you know what I mean? So it's really hard. What advice? Can I get back to you on that one?
Yes,
I really need to think about it.
And
I never thought about it.
Oh, right. Is there a particular book? Is there a particular book you would recommend anybody that you would have said, God, what's that?
Travels in the Cevennes with a Donkey by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's a fucking great book in which Robert Louis Stevenson crosses the Cevennes with a donkey, surprisingly given the title of the book. And it's just a great travel book because he sets out and you can tell that he's not thinking he's going to be writing a book about a donkey. The donkey's just there to carry his shit on his long walk, during which presumably he's expecting to have his biblical vision, as we were talking about earlier. But actually the book, as much as it's about him traveling, sleeping in the trees and doing this, it's about his relationship with the donkey, which is equally infuriating and enlightening to him. And eventually he falls in love with the donkey, of course, because even though the donkey is stubborn, irascible, and prone to behaviour that he might not consider to be appropriate, even though he's not a donkey, so how would he fucking know? Yes. So yeah, it's a good book. Travels in the Cevennes with a Donkey, and I'm currently reading the poems of. Where's that gone? I'm supposed to remember which book I'm reading on it, but I can't. The poems of Francois Villon. I remembered that without looking at it. He was a disreputable poet from 500 years ago. He was banished from Paris. He was tortured by the... it never happens. You never hear of poets being banished from Paris now, do you?
No.
Tortured by the clergy. Or have they? Poets have no power anymore, presumably.
I would imagine in the older days, the arts were a little bit sort of touchy at times. I think composers also had a lot of pressure, didn't they, to sort of come up with the goods. Otherwise, they also could get sort of murdered by the king. So,
I mean, that would suck, wouldn't it? The pressure's on. A hit or down. I know some managers that would be like, that would be so great. Write a hit or I'm going to fucking kill you.
I think it's often, I think with some periods in history, it was like, write something really upbeat and happy because I want to look good at this next kind of little gig that I'm doing. And if the composer thinks, I think you're a bit of a dickhead and I hate you, it's probably like, God, how am I going to be able to do this and keep my artistic integrity at the same time? So I think that's sometimes can be a bit tricky. But there you go.
Artistic integrity is interesting. I mean, I was working with a guy in the kitchen there, and he's from Mexico City, and he was telling me about like kind of narco balladeers over there. You can kind of, if you're too good a balladeer, your narco opponent, then the narcos will fucking whack you because they're like, kill the opposing narco's balladeer. You know, your bard will be fucking executed. So just be mediocre.
Yeah,
that's probably good. That's probably the advice I'd give myself.
Yeah, be mediocre.
Fucking exhaustingly mediocre. I think that's a good advice for anybody, isn't it?
Yes.
If I had children, that's what I'd tell them. Don't just fucking grow. Be a watchmaker. Grow flowers. Grow flowers. That's a good one. I'm growing basil at the moment. That's very nice.
Yes, well, that's always... They don't let you down a herb, do they?
No, you just need a small window, small pot, you know, and it's just... They're just so hopeless. You look at seeds and they look so, like, gravelly and fucking useless, and it's just like, look at it. It's like nothing. And then you've got something to put in your pasta. Then it's in your pasta.
It's in the pasta, and it gives you all the flavour you need. So that's all good. So there you go. But look,
miracle of life.
It is. I know. We're all one, aren't we? In a holistic love fest. Did you just briefly?
Only some of us. Go on. Sorry.
Did you enjoy your Glastonbury experience? By the way.
Which one?
Oh, you had more than
the one where I was poaching eggs. I had one where I turned into a dragon. Poached 10,000 eggs of Chez Nous. I was working at a cafe called Chez Nous. Very good. Right. And squatting in a teepee. But is that not the Glastonbury experience? It's in my second book story.
No, I was thinking the one where you actually play, not just for cooking, but playing live.
The one that I played live, it was nice because the one previous I'd been poaching eggs. And then the next one was like 10 years later, and I was playing on the main stage with the Brian Jonestown Massacre. And then the next time I went back, I was promoting my book at the smallest stage at the very top of the festival. So I kind of like, you know, what happens with me in Glastonbury? I seesaw between the heights and the depths. So did I enjoy it? Yeah, I enjoy Glastonbury. I like it.
Nice.
I like sitting in fields on drugs.
Absolutely, on the microdots. Did you, and with your kind of readings with the book, does it? Do you always get a good response? Do people love you?
They love me, only if they're not in the book.
Yeah.
I find, do people love me? No, they fucking hate writers. People hate writers. They look at you really askance. If they think you might write about them, people start like acting different because they're like, fuck, you might write about me. And what's the old saying? It's like, you should always be nice to your children because they might grow up to be writers. Do you know, are you familiar with that expression?
No, I've never come across that.
I like it. There's a nice Kurt Vonnegut quote as well.
Well, it works two ways because it's like, you know, because obviously the parent can say, well, also, you know, if you want me to keep the will as it is and you want any of my inheritance, you know, make me look good, matey. That's
if there is an inheritance. I mean, you know, I'm open for bribes. So if anybody out there is worried what I might write, just send me a fucking check and I'll happily not write a book for a check. You know?
Yes. Did you, I mean, when you did the book,
on the table.
Yeah. When you did the book, was there anything you had to take out, or did you think, no, that's all honest and everyone's happy with it?
Was there anything I had to take out? There's nothing I had to take out. I mean, nobody. Have you read the handmade versions?
No.
Oh, there's only 100 of those. Yeah, and that's the great thing, isn't it? You know.
Yes.
About production being in the hands of the workers.
It is. I'm absolutely the Socialist Workers' Party.
So, you? So, which copy of the book are you talking about?
The one which is on that.
If they indeed differ, of course.
Playing the bass with 3 left hands.
That one, yeah. Yeah. Which version? The handmade one or the published version?
The published version.
The Lloyd version. Yes. I don't know. I can't remember, honestly. I can hardly remember. Only the hallucinations are real in that book. I've said it before. You know, memory itself is a hallucination and a tapestry of our opinion. So how can I be expected to defend your tapestry against mine? But everything's in there that needed to be in there.
Yes.
Probably. And if it isn't, it'll be in the next book. But maybe in only 5 copies, because I think I'll only make 100 copies of the next book, and I might make each 25 different. That's a nice idea, isn't it?
God, that's art, isn't it? That is.
Well, that is a kind of art.
It's a kind
of art. It's fucking crafty. It's art. It's crafty, isn't it? I mean, they say that making books isn't art; it's a craft. You know, is it an art? What's the difference between an art and a craft? There's a difference between an artist and an artisan. I find that interesting because I always like to. There's a certain art and anything done beautifully, and I like the idea of confusing people. Really, are you confused? Am I confusing?
Well, I think craft doesn't have quite the same kudos that an artist has. There's something.
It doesn't have the kudos. It doesn't. But I don't know. Like I did some drywall recently, and it was a particularly tricky corner. There was all sorts of conjoining angles, and it was kind of old beams, and it's a tricky to get flat things on walls. You know, when the final corner came together, I was like, I felt as good about that as I did about, I don't know, probably better about that than finishing like an album or writing a book. I felt good. So it's just like, yeah. It's right. Who can say it's wrong? Do you know?
Yes, absolutely.
I can't think. I'd still be like, oh fuck, I could have done that a bit better. You know? There's always that, isn't there? That kind of drives you on, that little nagging thing that's always at you, saying, "Oh, we could have done that better. Could have done that," but which presumably makes you better at what you do, but isn't much fun to actually live with, I suppose.
No, it drives you to madness, I think. That would be
candy. That's what drink's for, though, isn't it? make the voices go all right. My mate James Cruikshank, he was an Australian musician, good friend of mine, James, God rest his soul. If he had one, he hadn't sold it. He used to say to me, he's like, well, when I sit down to write a song, he says it's a long process. And he'd worked with a band called The Cruel Sea, and he worked with Mick Harvey, and had a bad season or whatever. But he was just a friend of mine. Right? He said, when I sit down to write a song, he says, I have to shoo away the nagging demons of self-doubt. You're not very good at that. Why are you about? You have to shoo them away. He said, then the lumbering beast of indolence walks into the room and said, oh, fuck it. Why not just sit and watch that fucking video of a dog instead? And he's like, you can fuck off as well. Do you know? And then the kind of the fear bats arrive. It'll go wrong. Why do you get a fucking proper job? You know, this is not going to pay the rent. So you have to shoo away all these phantoms of your own mind before you can even sit down and play one note. I always liked that explanation he had for it.
Yes, well, it's a good one, actually. And I think with age, we sort of have many more of those voices that creep up. You don't get them when you're 16 or 18. One's too sort of frivolous and slightly confident or cocky. But when you get older, it's just, there's a whole gang of them, aren't there? Constantly nagging.
I might throw me back out. Don't write that poem. You might throw your back out. Have you ever thrown your back out?
Thankfully not. I haven't, but I've heard it. I heard it's painful, so I'm trying to avoid it. There's some.
I'm touching wood for you. I really am.
Thank you.
It's not a pleasant experience.
My dad.
Do you know when mine went? I did my. Sorry, go on, your dad.
No, my dad used to have a lot of back problems. So often I used to see him laying on the floor trying to sort of recover to get back to work the next day. So there you go. How did you do yours in, by the way?
I'm only telling you because it's actually a funny story, even though it wasn't funny at the time. I was working for a removal company, right? And we were moving this guy out of his house. And I was going backwards down the stairs, and he had an orthopedic mattress. Have you ever picked up an orthopedic mattress?
I think once, many decades ago.
Weigh a fucking ton, right? So I'm going backwards down the stairs with this orthopedic mattress, and it felt like somebody hit me in the middle of my back with a sledgehammer. I shouldn't laugh, really. But, it was kind of funny because we were carrying an orthopedic mattress.
Yes. And you thought, well...
how we laughed on our way down to casualty, yeah.
How long did it take to recover, by the way?
A year.
Oh.
Sciatica, yeah, it's pretty painful. It ends of your toes, don't numb, and it's pretty... But gradually, exercise and, henbane compresses and acupuncture, voodoo, I managed to get better. But, it's a long process. But, sciatica's fucking misery. Biggest nerve in the human body, isn't it? It's like toothache down your arse and into your toes.
Yes, it's. I've had sciatica, which has been very painful. So I
misery.
remember it is misery. I remember I used to sort of get it in the evenings and have to just lay on the floor and stick my leg in the air. Even when I was going for a walk once, I had to do that a few times because it was just horrendous. I think it was sciatica.
Mine got better. I mean, it's sciatica when it runs down your buttock and into your leg. It's unmistakable. It's just like that nerve, and it can get to the tips of your toes because that nerve runs all the way from the tips of your toes up through your buttock and into your lower back. It's the biggest nerve in the human body, sciatic nerve. And when it twangs, but it can be anything from like a dull ache into like a spreading misery down your leg. Hot and cold baths if you get it really bad. That's what I used to. When I used to get really bad, get into a hot bath, get into a cold bath. That's when you're really yelping with it.
Jesus Christ.
But mine went away. Mine's, with exercise, really exercise is the key to it. And anti-inflammatories. That's the thing. Not painkillers. Don't take fucking painkillers for it. Just to me, I sound like a doctor, don't I?
Yes.
Don't take painkillers because with painkillers, you work through it. It dulls the pain. Anti-inflammatories take the inflammation away, and the inflammation is what you nip in your fucking sciatic nerve with. So if you can stop it inflaming, diclofenac, 3 days diclofenac, first nip, 3 days of that.
Jesus.
Anyway,
there you go. There's a lot to take on here, actually. I'll have to make some notes. But look, this has been amazing. Thank you ever so much, Will, for giving me the time for this. If you want, I can always send you the link to this, and you can always use it on your social media platform sites.
Shall do, yeah. So when will it be out?
Hopefully next week.
Okay, great, because I have to apologise to a friend of mine who I said I was going to do an interview for, and I haven't done, and now I've done yours first, and I'll feel terrible if it comes out and he finds out. So, anyway, I've got to do another interview because I've done this one. But it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Take care. Have a good night.
Yes. Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Bye-bye. There you go. That is showbiz for you. That's also a beautiful ending to a beautiful conversation. That was me in conversation with Will Carruthers, who has got a book out. Do buy it. It's available from all good bookshops, also from his website as well. Just Google Will Carruthers. It's called Playing the Bass with 3 Left Hands. And anyway, just go and find his website. It's all good. Anyway, this is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me for some nice reason, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 show. And these have all been archived. Aren't you lucky? And the show is available from Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, and it's groovy. So there you go. Have a great week. Stay safe.